As usual, I can't tell what the heck is going on. So, good evening, everybody. Hello, who's here? Jared, Angie, Nancy, Jerry, Alexis, Ron, Max. Hi, Max. Kelly, Arban, Becca, Camille, and Michael. Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you. And all the other ships at sea. Good morning, my darlings and hamburgers. Good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it may be for you. I am here. It's a couple of moments after 7 o'clock, and it's about 7:01. And we are sitting here hoping that the hardworking firefighters will continue to hold back. Hey, Sean. Hey, David. Hoping that the firefighters will continue to hold back the flames and the blaze. We're getting a little tiny sprinkling of rain, which is good. And we're hoping that what comes with it is not lightning like we had last week. Actually, that was going on literally as I was finishing my my reading last week, and I got off to find the dog, the big dog, the nervous dog, just an absolute mess because the thunder had started, which I didn't hear at that point because I was talking. Very tad thing. I was reading and using up a lot of air. But anyway, so we're hoping that we get some more rain tonight without the lightning, because of course the lightning is what started all the fires in the first place. And there's Jeremy checking in. Hello, Jeremy. So that's what's going on in terms of the fire watch here in the Santa Cruz, California area. And thank you, Angie. And yes, we are doing our best to stay safe. We are hoping that everything will stay much the same. As I said, we actually have been very lucky because they've erected a fire line between where we are and much of the rest of the county. And that includes the part up in the northern part of the county where the fire is. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm talking purely personal safety here. We've already had some friends have to evacuate, and so we've been worried about them, and we ourselves are kind of, I wouldn't say we're exactly ready, but we know the possibility could come if the fire suddenly spreads, which of course is why we're hoping that there's no dry lightning tonight, which was the cause of last Sunday's conflagration, which is still burning. So anyway, and there are also fires all over California. So we got fires here in California. We've got people dealing with the hurricanes and tropical storms in other parts of the country. So things are tough all over. Not to complain, just to keep you updated, but we're doing okay. I am doing fine myself, working when I can, sleeping when I can. I'm afraid this weekend thing kind of, one of the friends who's been evacuated, we were Skyping today, and she said, why don't you change your Sunday night? I don't know if you could hear that. I think that pizza that somebody ordered just arrived upstairs because there's loud alarm noises from various dogs. Um, anyway, the blah, 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 blah. My brain is fractured by all this. Anyway, so I've been working when I can. I'm thinking about maybe at some point, not immediately, and you'll have plenty of warning, but I'm thinking about changing not this reading, but the 2 o'clock in the morning reading, just because by the time I get to bed, it's like 5 in the morning, and I stay up late anyway, but not that late. And it kind of cripples me for the next 2 days in this kind of jet laggy way that didn't used to happen to me 40 years ago, but for some reason now something has changed, and 3 hours of sleep doesn't work for me like it used to. Anyway, but I'm continuing to work. Deborah's continuing to work on her projects. All the young people in the house are still breathing, apparently, as far as we can tell. They don't move much, but when they do move, then we can check them off the list. Yep, still alive. The animals, half of them are on medication of various kinds or have specialty diets or blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it's exciting around here. Medardo, hello, good to see you. Es un placer, señor. So anything else to talk about? Just the usual. I mean, this just here I am, and here you are, and here we all are, and this is life in 2020. Yeah, and all those people who thought 2012 was going to be the Mayan death year. You were wrong, only by 8 years. So, if you were going off the Mayan calendar, that's not bad, because I think they made that up like 1,000 years ago. So, close enough. Anyway, here's hoping that 2020 has cratered. No, I shouldn't say that. Knock on wood. I won't even say that. Okay, I'm saying this purely for superstitious purposes. It'll get worse. Everything's going to get worse. It's going to be terrible. And there'll be meteors falling out of the sky and mutant cannibals and everything. So I won't make any optimistic promises about what might be to come. So I am going to read. I'm just thinking, as long as I've got you all sitting there, if there's anything else I wanted to talk to you about. I don't think so. I'm just happy to see that you guys are all out there still and look like you're in pretty good spirits. And because, this whole pandemic lockdown, I don't know how some of you, especially those who are in other countries, are doing, because obviously different countries are doing different than the United States. Most of them better, it has to be said. We have a quarter of the world's cases now, and we've had a quarter of the world's death with far less than a quarter of the world's population. But then again, the figures are probably a bit hinky from some of the other reporting countries, so we don't know exactly. But anyway, the fact that you're all still in a good mood, or seem to be, and that gives me some hope and some warm feeling inside. So I'm glad to see you. Anyway, yeah, I know. Becca's just said you that there's an asteroid that has a very small chance of hitting the Earth. I know. That's why I suddenly realized, let's not tempt fate. Let's not make any gross pronouncements about how things are going to get better from here, because then the next thing you do is you look up and there's a frickin' asteroid about to land on you. I'm not in favor of being hit by asteroids, so, I'm not being in favor of being hit by anything, but that an asteroid is a particularly bad thing to be hit by, and that is science, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, gentlies and ladymen, whatever it is. Anyway. So, with no further ado, I am going to start reading from Tailchaser songs, since I've already wasted a lot of time on chit-chat. For those of you who were not here in the middle of the night, early in the morning, I am now up to chapter 20. What happened in the last actually we had 3 chapters last night, because 2 of them were quite short. What happened in the last 3 chapters is that Pretty Tailchaser, the orange cat, with the star on his forehead, and Pounce Quick, the small kitten who is his companion and buddy, and Roof Shadow, a young cat who has become their friend, and she is now traveling with them. And then, of course, the crazy cat Eatbugs, who has been a character who's kind of wandered in and wandered out because he's not a very reliable character. They've all been captured. And they have been captured by the Claw Guard, which are the horrifying cat-like but bigger and weirder things that Pouncequick and others had seen with the red claws. And they have been dragged down into the huge, ugly, humming, buzzing mound, which Fritty and his companions had discovered and had very carefully tried to avoid, but it hasn't done them any good. And they have been captured by these horrible claw guards, Scratchnail and his cronies, and dragged down into the mound. And only at that point does Tailchaser realize that at some point during the last hectic moments, that Roof Shadow is gone. So he and Pouncequick and Eatbugs have all been captured, and they're being held prisoner by the Claw Guard in what appears to be the tunnels leading down into the mound. And Claw Guard have referred to it as Vastnir. Excuse me. So I'm going to start reading. Y'all ready? Chapter 20. Lo, Death has reared himself a throne in a strange city, lying alone, far down among the dim west. Edgar Allan Poe. Beyond the cavern, the tunnels seemed to grow warmer. Fritty knew that above ground it was winter. Snow and freezing rain were falling. Here, deep in the earth, how deep Tailchaser had no way of knowing, the air was becoming thick with heat and moisture. Eatbugs was up and moving now. He mumbled quietly to himself as he walked, but otherwise showed no signs of resistance to their captors. Longtooth, his muzzle not yet completely healed from the swipe that Eatbugs had given him, was taking great delight in harassing the old cat, who gamely resisted all attempts by the guard to enrage him. Tailchaser, trudging on leaden paws, once again began to feel the throb of the mound. Here, beneath the ground, the sensation was different, the vibration digging deeper into his bones and nerves. The pulse of the mound seemed lower and more basic, all-pervading but strangely more natural. Tailchaser knew that they were approaching their destination. "You can feel it, can't you?" The harsh croak made Fritty jump. Scratchnail was following close behind, watching him, the unpleasant yellow eyes observing his every movement. "I see that you started to hear the song of Vastnir. You're a sharp-sensing little bug, aren't you, Starface?" The chief moved up to Tailchaser's side. The massive, thick-muscled form looming over him intimidated Fritty and made it difficult to speak. I feel something," he stammered. "I felt it before, above ground." "Well," Scratchnail leered, "aren't you the clever, quick one? Don't you worry. There'll be some folk who'll pay plenty of attention to a smart, young Tom like you where we're going. More attention than you'll like, perhaps." With a cold, bleak grin that exposed few teeth, the Claw Guard chief dropped back to pace behind Fritty once more. The skin around the young cat's whiskers itched and crawled. He didn't want anyone or anything more interested in him than was already the case. He hurried forward to catch up with Eatbugs and Pouncequick. The earth throbbed. Soon the tunnel began to broaden. Every 100 or so jumps now, the company passed branching tunnels or caves. It was difficult to tell which, since they were just dark holes in the wall of the main shaft. The air continued to warm, a damp heat that made Fritty and his companions feel sluggish. Eatbugs twitched his head from side to side as if to throw off something binding. "Here now, back to the holes. Never do, never do." The mad old Tom looked imploringly, first at the unresponsive Pouncequick, then at Fritty, who could only shake his head. "All this bim-bam, bashing and gnashing? Can't. Eatbugs rolled his eyes and subsided into muttering. Tailchaser pushed at Pouncequick gently with his head. "Did you hear him, Pounce? What do you think of all this, Got your whiskers up, does it?" Fritty waited vainly for a response, then tried again. "What a story this will make when we get back to Meeting Wall, won't it? Do you think the folk will believe us?" After a moment, Pouncequick raised his head and looked at Fritty plaintively. "Where's Where's my friend Roof Shadow? He asked. His voice was so quiet that Tailchaser had to cock his ears forward to make out the words. We'll find her, Pounce. We'll find her, I promise. I swear on my tail name. We'll get away from here and find her. The kitten looked at him for a moment with a puzzled expression, then lowered his gaze to the ground once more. Skydancer's ears and tears, Freddy cursed himself. When am I going to stop making promises I have not the slightest chance of keeping? Still, he thought, I had to say something to Pounce. He has the look of someone who's going to lie down and float to the fields beyond any moment. At least I got a word or two out of him. Now Tailchaser noticed that the sound of the tunnel had changed. Below the near silent padding of their paws, he thought he could discern a thin wash of voices, cat voices, but very distant. Bitefast, the nearest guard, turned and hissed, We'll be home soon. You're home too. For a short while, anyway. Finally, the underground path widened again and turned downward. The pulsing had become constant and almost familiar, and the voices Freddy had noticed earlier sounded louder and louder. Then, when it seemed as if any moment they must come upon the source, Scratchnail stopped the procession. Now, he said, fixing Freddy and his comrades with a hard stare, we are about to enter Vastnir by one of the lesser gates. If you make any movement to escape, I will tear you to ribbons and be pleased to do it. And just in case you decide to try your luck, here he narrowed his gaze on Eatbugs, who turned his eyes away uncomfortably. Even if you're fast and tricky enough to get by me, which I doubt, you'll come to wish you died at my claws, I promise you. The Claw Guard are not the worst who home in the Vastnir Mound. Scratchnail turned to his fellows. And you two, remember, no one is to interfere, especially not the Tooth Guard. The prisoners stay with us until I say otherwise. Understood? It had better be. They all followed Scratchnail downward, and shortly rounded a bend in the tunnel to find themselves in a wide entranceway before the gate. Silhouetted at the end of the tunnel, by a fitful blue-green light, stood two massive Claw Guard, silent and terrible, bigger even than Freddy's captors. On either side of the entrance they guarded, on small piles of raised earth, were skulls. One was of an enormous growler, the eye sockets dark as sorrow. The other was the skull of a large horned beast. All four of these sentries, living and dead, looked down pitilessly on Tailchaser and his companions as they were led through. As he passed beneath the arched tunnel mouth into the depths of Vastnir, Freddy felt a strange sensation. As he had in his catmint nightmare, he began to experience a burning feeling on his forehead. Whatever it might be, neither his friends nor the Claw Guard took any notice of him. Beyond the threshold was a vision that would stay with Tailchaser as long as he lived. Before them sprawled a vast cavern, the roof as high above as the treetops of Rootwood. It was lit by the luminescent earth they had seen in the tunnels, and also by the faint blue glow of stones that protruded down through the ceiling rock. The phantom light rendered all in the cavern into spirits and vaulting shadows. Below, on the cavern floor, countless cats moved back and forth like termites in rotten wood. Most of them appeared to be normal folk, although their faces were so full of despair and pain that they seemed almost a different race. Among them moved the Claw Guard, lumpish and huge, directing the streaming insect-like hordes as they crept to and fro. It's like some horrible dream of First Home, Freddy thought. The stench of fear and blood and unburied memory rose up on the hot air currents and filled his nostrils, choking him. With a snarl, Scratchnail herded them down to the cave floor, across the jutting rocks and warm, moist soil. They maneuvered among the lines of cats, brushing past folk who did not even look up but only plodded on toward whatever grim destination the ubiquitous claw guard were leading them to. As they passed one group, Fritty saw a smallish cat, eyes and ribs bulging, who appeared to be sick. He coughed and staggered, then collapsed to the stones. Before Fritty could move to help him, a claw guard shouldered his way past and bent over the sick one. Then the brute picked him up by the neck and shook him violently. Tailchaser could hear the sound of bones snapping. The claw guard flung the broken body to the side with an impatient head flip, and the line of cats moved on. Tailchaser stared after them, then over at the crumpled body lying unnoticed and unmourned in the dirt. His hatred flared, then settled into a low flame, banked deep inside himself. He also turned away. As Scratchnail's procession reached the far side of the great cavern and was approaching the gaping maw of another tunnel, a thin, piercing voice called out, "Scratchnail!" The sound seemed to come from one of the innumerable caves in the rock wall before them. The chief halted the group as a dim shape appeared in the darkness of a cave mouth. "What do you want of me?" Scratchnail snapped angrily. His voice, though, held an odd intonation. "Hissblood wants to see you, Scratchnail," the thin voice said, sibilant and mocking. As the shape in the grotto spoke, Fritty could see the gleam of its teeth, but no reflected shine of its eyes. "That's a laugh," the chief snarled. "Why should I care, anyway?" In the dark grotto, the teeth were bared again. "Hissblood wants to know who your prisoners are. There was to be no more taking of captives. That was the understanding, no? My business is between the fat one and myself, and there's no room for you crawlers to go sticking your hairless snouts into it. If Hissblood wants to have any dealings with me, I'll be in the lower catacombs later on." Scratchnail pivoted and walked away. "He will meet you there," said the thin voice, and the sound of deathly merriment came from the shadowed cave. Entering the huge tunnel in the cave wall, Longtooth hissed at Scratchnail, "What do the Tooth Guard want with these, anyway?" The chief turned on him with a growl. "You keep your muzzle shut." Longtooth asked no more questions, and they went some distance down the tunnel in silence. Scratchnail finally halted the group at a widening of the way. The chief pushed Eatbugs and Pouncequick roughly to one side, then turned to Bitefast. "You and this dribbling mimray," he barked, indicating Longtooth, "take these two down to the middle catacombs. They're not to go anywhere else until I say so. Me. No one else." Bitefast nodded. "Good. I'm going to take the clever one here for a special audience. I think you know who will be interested in him. Now move." With this, he propelled Tailchaser up the tunnel, and the other claw guard herded Fritty's companions off toward a side passage. Tailchaser turned as he was pushed forward and called back over his shoulder, "I'll be back for you, Pounce. Don't worry. Take care of him, Eatbugs." Scratchnail dealt him a stinging paw blow to the side of the head that brought moisture to his eyes. "Fool," rasped the beast. The winding way led farther down into the earth. The tunnel they traveled was strewn with rocks and bits of bone and wet things that made Fritty wince when he stepped on them. He had to scrape against the dirt walls to avoid contact with the terrifying claw guard chief. Now the shaft pitched down steeply. The faint glow of the walls was interrupted by splashes of blue and purple light that seemed to be reflected from farther down the tunnel. Stepping along the sloping pathway, Tailchaser also noticed a change in the air. It was becoming much colder. Within 20 steps, the chill had sharpened, and the ground underneath his pads seemed hard, perhaps frozen. With Scratchnail beside him, he ducked to pass beneath the low roof. When he raised his head again, he found that they had passed into a great chamber, the seat of Vasmir. They had come to the cavern of the pit, the heart of the mound. The cavern was high-domed, the ceiling dark and distant. Around a central pit, fissures in the ground spewed forth indigo light, stark beams glaring up through the mist of the cavern floor. The walls above were honeycombed with grottos and tunnels, and everywhere dark shapes streamed in and out, bustling around the wide rim of the pit and climbing up the jagged stones to disappear into the holes above. Fritty could see the plume of his breath in the icy air. Cold like this, so far underground, was terribly wrong, but what was not in this nightmare place? Moving forward at Scratchnail's harsh insistence, he looked now to the pit and the massive shape that rose from it, dominating the subterranean chamber. As he neared, wonder turned to horror. Up from the dark, mist-shrouded center of the pit rose a squirming mass, a heaving pile of small bodies that protruded above the edge of the huge hole in the cavern floor like a volcano rising in a deep canyon. The squirming mountain was a mass of animals, tortured, dying, many already dead. Cats and flafas, squeakers, priere, growlers, and rick-chick-chick. The heap of writhing beasts gave forth a million ghost-faint sounds. Many of the creatures were maimed or dismembered. Closer to the bottom, most were not even moving. The stench penetrated Tailchaser's nose, and he gagged. He slumped to the cold ground, the mist billowing up around him, hiding for a moment the terrible sight. Scratchnail leaned down and butted him with his wide, flat head. "Step up now, you simpering beetle. You're about to meet his lordship." Weak in the knees and stomach, Freddy was prodded and dragged forward to the edge of the pit. He wanted to close his eyes. Instead, repulsed yet fascinated, he stared out at the squirming mountain, at the thousands of blank eyes and mindlessly sagging mouths, puffing little jets of vapor. The claw guard stepped up beside him. "Your mightiness, your humble servant has brought you something." Scratchnail's voice grated and echoed from the towering walls. "Oh, you have you?" bubbled a grotesque, suety voice. "Throw it in with the rest. I'll eat it later." A gigantic dark shape, heretofore invisible at the top of the pile of bodies, turned its head and opened vast, eggshell white eyes. Blind eyes. Tailchaser gave a bleat of fright and leaped backward against the stone-hard body of Scratchnail. Cowering between the claw guard's legs, Freddy forgot for a moment even his fear and hatred of the chieftain. The thing atop the pit blew all else from his mind like a screeching wind. It was a cat. 20, 50, 100 times bigger than himself. Tailchaser could not tell. Its swollen body was so massive that its tiny legs could not reach past to lift it. It lay, bloated and supremely powerful, on the peak of the wriggling flesh mound. "No, great one, it is not to eat yet." Freddy heard Scratchnail's voice, distant, unimportant. "This is one of the ones you sensed, great one. Do you remember?" The hideous creature pivoted its necklace head until the blank, dead eyes were facing the shivering Tailchaser. The nostrils flared. "Oh, yes," said the voice slowly, a sound like mud splattering on stone. "We remember now. Did it have companions? Where are they?" The voice took a sharper tone. "He had two, O Lord." Scratchnail sounded nervous. A kitten, Lord, a little mewling kitten, and a
Crazed old Tom, filthy as sun and flowers. But this one, this is the one you want. There's something to this one. I'm I'm sure of it.
Ah, said the giant, and rolled back slightly onto its side as if to think. It poked its round head down toward the pile on which it lay, but could not overcome its own bulk. A look of annoyance creased the vast brow, and suddenly 3 clawguard, who had been watching with dismay from the opposite edge of the pit, leaped down into the hole. They quickly plucked the struggling form of a cat out of the midst of the heap and scrambled up to the monster. As they clambered over his belly, he opened his mouth complacently. The wriggling, yowling cat was dropped in. Crunching sounds were heard as the great cat began to chew, and a look of contentment crossed the blind face. As Tailchaser looked on helplessly, the beast swallowed, then turned its attention back toward him once more.
Now, it dripped, let us see what kind of folk threaten our designs.
There was a shocking jolt. Tailchaser felt for a moment as if a huge mouth had picked him up and shaken him. Then came a fiery pain, and something bored into his mind. Digging, burrowing, it tore through his thoughts, knocking them asunder. It waded through hopes and dreams and ideas. It carelessly crushed notions as it passed. An invisible force held Tailchaser to the spot. He contorted and howled as the mind of the beast invaded him. When it was over, he lay, stunned and quivering, on the icy earth beside the pit. A stabbing pain ebbed and surged behind his forehead. Finally, Scratchnails spoke. His voice sounded subdued.
Well, great master?
The shape above the pit yawned, showing blackened teeth. A brief flare of light empurpled the scabby gray fur.
This little bug is nothing. There are suggestions, yes, hints, but no power to speak of. It can do nothing. You say its companions are harmless?
This was the only one with even a trace of anything different, Lord. I swear it.
Well,
there was a bored finality now in the liquid heaviness of the creature's speech.
Take it away. Kill it, or put it to work digging tunnels. We do not care.
The claw chieftain dragged Fritty to a standing position, then forced him toward a doorway out of the cavern.
Clawguard,
called the bloated thing. Scratchnail whirled and bobbed subserviently. Yes, master of all.
Next time, do not so lightly disturb the meditations of Lord Hearteater.
The milky eyes glinted. Bobbing and choking, Scratchnail hurried Tailchaser out of the cavern of the pit. Stumbling and stupefied, Tailchaser was driven through the labyrinthine corridors of Vastnir. His captor dogged his footsteps and did not speak. Although he felt spirit broken, still Fritty's mind was awhirl with the thought of what he had seen. Hearteater? Lord Hearteater of the Firstborn? Fritty had seen Grisraz Hearteater, the ancient enemy of the folk. He had heard him speak. A fit of shivering racked his weakened body as he thought of the huge blind thing lolling in the cavern behind them. He had to get word to Fenswalker and the others. Somehow, the court of Harar must know of the danger, whatever good it might do. But how could they defend themselves against such power, such terrible minions? Hundreds of the fierce Clawguard were in the main caverns alone. There was no way of knowing how many more lurked in this insect nest of tunnels and caves. And how can I do anything anyway? He thought bitterly. I'm under sentence of death. His mind finally turned to Scratchnail, whose hot breath even now feathered his tail. Tailchaser dimly recalled that Scratchnail had been somehow embarrassed before the terrifying heart-eater. Surely the Claw Guard leader would not suffer Fritty to live after that. Limping, pondering, Tailchaser felt a gust of dry air ruffle his face fur. He looked up. Here the tunnel was dark, almost lightless. Fritty could faintly see forms moving toward them in the shaft ahead. With startling swiftness, Scratchnail reached his hook-taloned paw forward and slammed Tailchaser against the side of the passageway. For a moment he had to strain even to catch his breath. As he wheezed helplessly, he heard a strange rustling, a creaking as of old tree limbs, and suddenly the tunnel was full of whispering shadows. Several dark shapes passed by. Tailchaser could faintly see tails and ears, but all seemed shadowy and indistinct. The air was full of choking dust and a cloying, sweet smell. Beside him, Scratchnail lowered his head respectfully and averted his gaze. A faint sibilance as of dry, powdery speech fluttered in the air, and the strange shapes had passed up the corridor. As Fritty regained his breath, Scratchnail stared up the passageway with burning eyes.
"The Bone Guard," whispered the dark beast. "The Master's closest servants."
At the mouth of a cross tunnel, indistinguishable by Fritty from the countless others they had passed, Scratchnail halted.
"I don't know what your secret is," he growled, heavy brows shadowing his eyes. "But I know there's something there. I will not make the mistake of taking you before the Fat One again without knowing what it is, but I will find out. The Master can make mistakes, and I believe you are one of them." The chief snorted angrily. "Whatever your little secret is, I will force it out of you. In the meantime, you could keep your miserable self occupied. Get in there."
Scratchnail extended a malformed paw, indicating the hole near Tailchaser. Screwing up his courage, apparently he was to live a little while longer, Fritty asked, "Where are my friends?"
"Filling the bellies of the Tooth Guard if I don't return soon. Keep your nose out. You'll have enough to worry about just saving your own wretched pelt. Now move!"
The chief gave Fritty a fierce shove that sent him stumbling into the opening behind him. He lost his footing on the inclined gravel surface and found himself skidding and tumbling down into deeper darkness. As he rolled to a halt, he heard Scratchnail's voice scrape down to him.
"I'll be back to see you soon enough. Never fear."
A coughing chuckle bounded down the shaft. It took some moments for Tailchaser to accustom himself to the almost total absence of light. He was in a chamber of rock. He could see the dark forms of other cats huddled at the extremities of the chamber. The stone cavern walls sweated moisture, and the air was hot and damp. Scores of emaciated, dead-eyed folk lay about him. Most, sunk deep in misery, did not even look up at the new arrival. As Tailchaser slunk along the wall, hunting for another exit or a place to lie down, some of the cats snarled weakly up at him as if he were intruding on their territory, but it was a perfunctory sort of resistance. The thought of so many folk crammed into this tiny space, forced to live next to and on top of each other in sweltering heat, brought anger to Tailchaser's spirit once more. As he stepped across the sprawled bodies, Fritty was halted by the tones of a familiar voice. He scanned the faces and shapes of those around him, but saw no one he recognized. Neither could he summon a name to match the memory. He was about to continue across the cavern when his gaze touched on the cat who lay at his feet. This one was shrunken, thin as a ferret. His sunken, bleary eyes stared hopelessly up at Fritty. It was this mumbling apparition whose voice had stopped him, and now Tailchaser sucked in a deep breath of surprise as recognition swept him. It was young Jump Tall, one of the delegates from the Meeting Wall clan to the court of Harar. He looked on the verge of death. "Jump Tall," said Freddie. "It's me, Tailchaser. Do you remember me?" For a moment, Jump Tall looked on uncomprehendingly. Then his eyes slowly focused. "Tailchaser?" he mumbled. "Tailchaser? From home?" Freddie bobbed his head encouragingly. "Oh." Jump Tall closed his eyes, weakened, and was silent for a moment. When he opened them, a spark of comprehension was there. "I don't understand," he said, "but luckier you died." Jump Tall's eyes closed again. He refused to say any more. Roof Shadow crouched in the shelter of an overhanging rock, watching the flurrying snow. The chill air made her feel dizzy. She wanted desperately to get up, to run and keep running until she was out of this horrible forest, far away from the terrible, throbbing mound that was the source of all distress. When they had been attacked by night, given only scant warning by the appearance of the crazed woolly cat, she had run with her friends, had run wildly. For all her seasons of hunting, she had been panicked, frenzied. At one point, she had almost knocked down little Pouncequick in her overwhelming desire to escape. The shame of that still hurt her more than her wounds. But as they ran, something had seized her, knocking her off her paws. She had grappled with something large, but by scratching and twisting had managed to pull free. Bolting into the deep brush, she had lain hidden for some time, hearing the sound of flight and pursuit carrying onward into the night. Not until the first rays of spreading light had she forced herself to crawl forth and look for a hiding place out of the cold. She had been hurt by the thing that had grabbed her. Her hind leg was very painful. She could not put her full weight on it and had limped a long way over frosty ground before locating the windbreak. She had lain for 2 full nights and days, sick, feverish, too weak to go hunting. Her companions were gone, captured probably or killed, and at this moment all she wanted to do was go far away, to disappear into the southern forests and never think of this terrible place ever again. But at the moment she could go nowhere. Her instincts told her to stay put. She needed to heal. The thought of Tailchaser and Pouncequick had stirred her for a moment, and she lifted her head and scented the air. Then a shooting pain contorted her face, and she laid her chin back down on the cold earth and pulled her tail, and lay her chin back down on the cold earth and pulled her tail over her nose and eyes. Deep underground, in the mazes of Vasnir, Freddie Tailchaser was learning a few of the secrets of the mound. Jump Tall, his acquaintance from nesting days, was too weak to talk much, but with the help of a young cat named Paw Grip, he had been able to explain some puzzling things to Freddie. "You see, the Clawguard are mostly just the bully boys. They're fierce enough, Harar knows," said Paw Grip with a grimace, "but they don't make any decisions. Even their chiefs don't make many, I don't suppose." "What do you mean?" asked Tailchaser. "They can't even hunt unless someone tells them to. Whiskers! No one even makes Mimre in this ghastly ant heap unless somebody gives him permission." "And you say that there are other creatures?" Freddie thought of the shadowy bone guard and shook himself nervously. "His blood and his tooth guard," whispered Jump Tall in a quavering voice. He coughed. "They're bad, sure enough," assented Paw Grip. "They're even uglier and more wrong, if you know what I mean, than the claws. They just seem to skulk around and keep everybody behaving. Even most of the claw guards seem scared of them." Tailchaser was puzzled. Where do they all come from? I've never seen or heard of any folk like them. Jump Tall shook his head, and Paw Grip answered, No one has. No one knows, but you know who. Here the little cat lowered his voice and looked around. You know who can do all kinds of things. Make catfolk and growlers. Worse things than that have happened down here. Paw Grip trailed off significantly. Unnerved by the reference to Heart Eater, whose presence still loomed huge and frightening in his memory, Fritty got up and stretched. He walked to the entrance of their cell and looked up the shaft. But why the digging? He wondered aloud. Behind him, Jump Tall raised himself up on his forepaws and swayed weakly. Cats weren't meant to dig, he said with surprising strength. Killed Earpoint. Killed Streamhopper. Jump Tall shook his head sadly. He looks more ancient than old Snifflick, thought Fritty. How did it happen? He is scarcely older than I am. Always digging they are. Or rather, we are, said Paw Grip. Should think they'd have enough nasty tunnels by now. Then why? Persisted Tailchaser. I don't know, Paw Grip admitted. But if they keep digging like they have been, soon all the tunnels will come together. The whole world will fall into their holes. Killed Streamhopper, muttered Jump Tall sadly. Killing me. Chapter 21. Here sighs and cries and wails coiled and recoiled on the starless air, spilling my soul to tears. A confusion of tongues and monstrous accents toiled in pain and anger. Voices hoarse and shrill and sounds of blows, tumult and pandemonium that still whirl on the air. Dante Alighieri. After a long passage of sleepless time for Fritty, several claw guard came to the mouth of the prison and summoned the captives out to work. Whining and huffing, they scrambled one after another up the steep shaft. Fritty was surprised to see many of the folk moving at all, let alone making the strenuous climb, but Paw Grip explained that no one was fed unless he or she could clamber out. Those who could no longer manage the ascent would remain in the small cavern until they died. Jump Tall, with help from Tailchaser and Paw Grip, managed to struggle up the sloping entranceway. At the top, they all made a hurried meal of insects and grubs. Then the waiting claws bullied them into a straggling line and led them through a seemingly endless succession of tunnels. They were delivered over to Snout Scar, a heavy claw whose fur clung patchy and sparse over his muscular body. Snout Scar sent the prisoners in bands of 3 and 4 down a tangle of short tunnels that led out from the central underground chamber. Tailchaser found himself paired with 2 older cats, both of them so weary and bedraggled that they could not muster the energy for conversation. As they reached the mouth of their designated tunnel, Fritty turned and asked of no one in particular, "But what do we do?" Snout Scar wheeled around, smacking Tailchaser with a flailing paw. Fritty crashed to the ground, and Snout Scar's knobby face, crisscrossed with the whitened marks of many battles, loomed over him. "I'll have no sunworms questioning me. Is that clear?" he raged. His body stank. "Yes," quailed Tailchaser. I just didn't understand." "You'll dig is what you'll do, and you'll dig hard. Sun burn you, and you'll be finished when I say that you are. Do you see?" Fritty nodded his head miserably. "Good," continued Snout Scar, "because I'll have my eye on you from now on, and if I catch you shirking, I'll have your tongue out. Now dig." Fritty ran to rejoin his tunnel mates, who were cringing at the attention that had been turned in their direction. They gave Tailchaser reproachful looks as they all climbed down into the tunnel. The rest of the day passed in damp, steamy misery. Tailchaser and his two companions scraped away at the end of a small tunnel using the claws and feet that Miroslav, the All-Mother, had never intended for this kind of activity, to scratch the hard, clay-like soil. It was monotonous, spine-bending work. In such a confined place, Fritty could find no comfortable position for extended digging, and before the day was half over, he began to ache. They paused briefly at what must have been midday. Fritty tried unsuccessfully to clean the packed earth from his sore paws and bleeding, lacerated pads. After what seemed like mere moments of rest, they were ordered back into their tunnel. As time wore on, Fritty found himself wanting only to lie down and sleep. If they killed him, what difference would it make? It would happen sooner or later anyway. But when he had almost convinced himself, the snarling head of Snoutscar would appear, blocking the entrance to the burrow, eyes glittering and mouth twisted. Tailchaser would redouble his efforts, digging rapidly and painfully, long after the head had disappeared again. The two older folk at his side had mastered a relentless but unhurried pace. Toward the end of the digging time, Freddy finally began to imitate them. At last, Snoutscar ordered them up from the tunnels. The paw and bone-weary group shambled back to their prison hole, escorted by harrying Clawguard. Half tumbling down the incline, Tailchaser fell almost immediately into a deep, overwhelming sleep. Deeper in the catacombs, with hundreds of jumps of earth and rock between themselves and the sun, Pouncequick and Eatbugs had fared no better than Fritty. As Tailchaser had been led unwillingly away, Longtooth and Bitefast had shoved and threatened the two remaining companions down into a cave several levels below. There they had been instructed to stay until Scratchnail should return and decide what to do with him. Unlike Fritty, in the cave to which he was eventually led, Pouncequick and the old cat found themselves the sole inhabitants of their prison, but cracked and split bones strewn across the dark floor suggested that they were not the first inhabitants. After what had seemed like hours of solitude, a soft, snuffling sound broke the cavern's silence. Certain that it was the Clawguard returning to kill them, Pouncequick stiffened himself against the far wall of the hole, ready to resist that final departure. A strange, pale shape appeared in the entrance of their prison cave. Pouncequick's immediate relief, this was obviously not one of the Clawguard, was quickly replaced by a disturbing chill, a strange feeling like putting one's nose into a nest of scurrying white termites. Eatbugs, in fitful sleep at the other end of the tiny grotto, pitched and quivered as the shape advanced into the chamber. Pouncequick strained to focus on the intruder. What was wrong with its fur? The creature had none. Cat-shaped, it was as hairless as a newborn kitten. At first, wildly, Pouncequick thought it must be some kind of monstrous infant. Its eyes were sealed shut, as were the eyes of the folk when they emerged from the womb. The thing turned toward Pouncequick, huge nostrils dilating. Then, in a high, whispering voice, it spoke. "Ah, the little newcomer. How nice of you to join us." Its speech was sibilant, like the voice of a hliza. As it drew nearer, Pouncequick could see that it had no eyes at all, just folds of skin below the brow. He pushed himself farther away, arching his back. "What do you want with us?" quavered the kitten. "Ah, it knows the higher singing." The thing gave a sinister giggle, which turned to a yawn, showing a mouthful of long, thin teeth like ivory pine needles.
Well, little surface squeaker, it grinned, if you must know, I have come to take you to Master Hissblood, who earnestly desires to meet a fascinating young Tom like yourself.
Hissblood? Said Pouncequick, hiccuping with fright.
One of the great lords of the Tooth God, yes. A very great power in the mound. His blood yearns to know what makes you and your companions so awfully interesting to Chief Scratchnail. You see, little worm friend, Master Hissblood and your Clawguard friend are, shall we say, friendly rivals.
Again, the eyeless tooth guard revealed that thicket of gleaming teeth and moved toward the kitten, his furless skin bagging and wrinkling as he slouched closer and closer.
Nipslither, boomed a voice. I expected your mole nuzzling master would send you.
The tooth guard leaped back, startled, large nostrils flaring.
Scratchnail,
he hissed. The claw guard captain had come silently down the entranceway and now blocked the only exit from the small cavern.
Doesn't your master think I know better than to trust those witless minions of mine? Ha!
Scratchnail barked a hoarse laugh.
Don't try to hinder me, you oaf,
whispered Nipslither.
I shall make you pay for it if you do.
His tone brought the fur up on Pouncequick's back. But Scratchnail only emitted a rasp of disgust and lowered his head as the tooth guard began a slow, circling movement. Without warning, Nipslither leaped forward, fangs bared, to be met by the rearing claw guard. There was a great outrush of breath as they came together. Crouched against the cold stone, Pouncequick watched, wide-eyed, as the two figures writhed and spat on the floor of the tiny cavern. In the darkness, he could only glimpse the combat as it boiled from wall to wall. Here, a gleam of wicked teeth. There, the spotted underbelly of Scratchnail bared for a moment. The creature's two tails, one black, the other naked and coiling, twined about each other like maddened serpents. There was a brief... Let's try that one again. The creature's two tails, one black, the other naked and coiling, twined about each other like maddened serpents. There was a brief flurry of thumping noises, a yowl of pain, and then Scratchnail was lunging down to catch Nipslither in his heavy jaws, to grasp the hairless beast's throat. The claw-guard chieftain's mighty neck muscles jumped and pulsed, a short cracking sound, and Scratchnail's enemy sagged. The black beast dropped the body of the tooth guard. It lay kicking feebly for a moment, then was still. Scratchnail turned to the cowering Pouncequick. The claw guard's body was sleek with wounds, with blood, but he seemed to give it no more notice than rainwater.
You don't know how lucky you are, little sun rat, he grated. Hissblood would bring you to a world of sorrow. Now, you and the old dirt fur, he indicated Eatbugs, who had slept through everything. You just do what you're told. I'll be back to check on you.
Scratchnail disappeared up the entranceway without a backward glance at Pouncequick or Eatbugs or the broken, eyeless thing on the cavern floor. And that's where I'm going to stop, although we're only about, I got about another couple of pages in that chapter, but it's a good place to stop, and it's almost 8 o'clock. So, thank you for indulging me. Thank you for listening to me make up voices as I go. Honest to God, I have not literally read this book since 1985. I read part of it I skimmed part of it back in in year 2000 to write a 15th anniversary thing. And I read one or two different people's screenplays, versions of it, but I haven't read the actual book in a very long time. So I don't remember much of anything. I mean, I know some things. So I'm always, as I'm reading, there's a part of me that's going, oh God, quick, put the name of the character in. So I have some idea of who it's going to be. You know, when somebody's starting to show up, or say, you know, a figure stood in the doorway or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. And I'm going, quick, where, trying to find it on the page so I can do a voice when the time comes. So it's an entertaining, it's an entertaining way of doing things. So thank you for humoring me. Anyway, it was lovely to see you all. So far, so good. No thunder, no lightning here. We hope it will stay that way. Little rain, very welcome, especially for all of those who have either been evacuated or are worried about being evacuated, or have who are out there fighting the fires. Of course, you know, we wish them the very best, including many firefighters who come in from out of state, and for which we are extremely grateful, of course. Meanwhile, the pandemic, I don't want to say rages on, because that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of giving it a personality. And a pandemic is not like that. A disease is not like that. It doesn't really rage, it just does its thing. And unfortunately, there are some things that we live on this earth with that mean us no good. They can't help it. They're just bad for us. I won't name any names, but some of them are insurance salesmen. No, that's not true. That's not true. Many of my very best friends are insurance salesmen. I'm not sure I would let anybody in my family marry one, but you know, I'm open-minded. We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, so with that thought, oh, my poor brain. With that thought, I, as usual, want to wish you all so very many thanks for coming to join me. And I urge you once again to be cognizant of those around you who might be in need of help at times like this. Those who might need a pick-me-up, a phone call, a Skype, a Zoom meeting, or simply an email saying, hi, how are you? I'm worried about you. How are things going? And while everything else is going on, we will continue to hang out here on Sundays, or at least I will, and I hope you will hang out with me. So with that said, from Rancho Beal Williams, I bid you all hasta la próxima. That means until next time. Y vaya con Dios, which means go with God, but it also just means goodbye. And aloha, which is Hawaiian for pass me the pulled pork. And I think, yeah, I think that's it. So anyway.